I tried to stay quiet and keep my head down low, but the Spirit of the Lord said, son, let it show. Like a wild wind blowing through the midnight pines, His word burns hotter than Kentucky's shine. Every time I try to silence what He's done, it roars like thunder, can't be outrun. There's a fire in my bones, I can't hold it in. I'm shouting redemption, forgiveness of sin. Like Jeremiah said, it's a flame that won't rest.
Welcome to St. Anthony's Chapel, guys. This is one of my favorite chapels. It reminds me of Lord of the Rings. It's beautiful. Today it's empty because it has rained a ton today, and it's on a Tuesday. Nobody's here, and which is rare because the last two times I came here, which I thought was cool, was they were having a wedding here, both times. And in fact, they had to kick me out before the wedding because I was just hanging out here. The sun was absolutely beautiful, shining into the windows, and they said, "Hey, you got 10 minutes, and then we got to kick everybody out." And so I said, "Okay, no problem." And as I walk by, I walk out of the cathedral. I want to say cathedral. It's not a cathedral. It's a chapel. As I walk out of this chapel, there's a place for the brides and the grooms, and then there's this dinner hall. And I looked in, and it was beautiful. They had all this. They had a big white table, or a big table with a white linen cover on it, and it had all the beautiful crystal glasses and all the fancy dishes out, and it was a dinner that they were going to have later after the wedding. So and it just happened to be like I just came at a time where they were about to have a wedding, and I thought, man, this is a time that we're at. We are so close, and now all these guys have got it figured out in the puzzle that that we know that we are going to go home here in probably less than a week. So congrats to us. But the other thing is, too, I wanted to come here because not only just to show you how beautiful it is, but I wanted to talk about a few more confirmations that I've needed personally, and I want to share with them because they're so cool. And I think some of you guys may appreciate these. And it's not just that they're confirmations. It's that they're built on God knowing long ago and then putting us in a perfect spot to spot these confirmations. My frustration through life has always been, God, how come you don't show yourself directly when you're talking to me? You know, there's one time I'd seen Christ in my whole life, and it was when I was in Texas. You know, after some experience, I went into the church, and the ice fog or whatever that is, all that fog that they have on stage with the drums and the whole thing. It's not black ice, guys. Help me out. Dry ice. The dry ice, you know, where it fills the whole room up with smoke and stuff like that. I saw His Spirit walk through that dry ice, and it molded. And I could tell that was His Spirit because it looked just like Him. Just the way I could not mistake in His Spirit. And He was in that church. I thought that was really great. I thought that was really cool that He was there and I could see Him that day. Even if it was for a mere second, just walking on stage under the dry ice. And so, but I want to show you guys that, because I'm very much questioning about the rapture. I know that I shouldn't, but as a man of logic, you know, it doesn't make sense to me. That's just how it is. And so, but the more I practice my faith, the more faith I practice, the more faith I get back. To me, it's not just a power move of, okay, I'm just going to believe and it's going to happen. You know, Christ, I know a lot of you guys have said that it's going to happen no matter what. And I've got to the point where I know it's going to happen. And I know that the event of Noah happened, you know, and if the event of Noah happened and the miracle, and the miracle of Christ happened, and I know that if we look in the Bible, God is very much a God of numbers, and he is very much a God of times, seasons, and we also see that he told everybody, when I'm coming the first time. He had prophets that prophesied his birth, almost to the, and then he even had 3 wise men come because they were watching for the signs. And it's no different. But because I think what's interesting is that it's easy to read somebody's life and see it in a storybook fashion, which in many ways the Bible is a storybook, but it's obviously rooted in, for us, it's real, but for a lot of people, they look at it as a story and that it can't happen. And then, of course, when biblical times, but when you're in the story, it's much harder to believe when you're in the story than watching the character go through it. I write books, and so it's much easier for me to know, okay, my character's going to start at point A, and he's going to start and end at point B, and I'm going to have him go through point C, D, B and C to get to point D, and it's going to look like this. But in the meantime, my character is in B, and he's thinking, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get to point D. So, and that's how, to me, it's the irony is that I'm an author, and but when you're actually living out real biblical times, and that point D, or our last exit, is here, and we have finally solved the riddle, that we are at the end, and to see that in biblical times, but the reason why I'm saying this is because as I grow in my faith, I still need the manna. I still need the manna for God to come in every single day, because spiritually, I'm one of those guys that I need to hear from God spiritually, and if I can't see you, I at least want to see the things that you have for me, God. And so God, in his mercy and love, has shown me something. Like yesterday, he showed me a video of a gal that was talking about something completely unrelated, but it perfectly 100% fit what God wanted to tell me at the time concerning this event that's coming up for us guys. And then the other thing, and of course the girl in the video had no idea. She doesn't even know where she doesn't even know that I'm watching her video. But I wanted to give you guys some really strong confirmations, and the reason why I want to give you the strong confirmations is because it's not just what we see as a confirmation is an accumulation of all the things that have come, and that's what makes it a great confirmation. It's not just a single event, I want to say. It's a accumulation of many things, and I'll give you an example. This morning, I went to the Oak Lawn racetrack because it opened up for training, and the way they have things named back there is they have 30 different stalls, different rows of barns, and each barn is named after a famous racehorse. I found it very inconvenient because if you've never been there before and they tell you go to barn Susan Girl, which is a name of a horse, you're like, where's the name of the horse? Why don't they just number the barns? It makes way more sense if they number it, as a first time. But obviously if you're there longer, you'll realize that every barn is named after a famous racehorse. So as I get to work, I drive and I'm looking for my barn, and I'm looking and I'm like, no, that's not my barn, that's not my barn, that's not my barn. And then I finally find my barn that I go do the business, and then I leave. And then for some strange reason, I stop at the very last barn before turning around and having to go back and then out the exit. And the very last barn, and I thought this was cool, was the name of that horse that they had named was Heavenly Prize. I thought, wow, that is the name of the very last barn before I exit out of this place, because I'm going all the way up and then I have to turn around and then exit, right? And the last barn before I turn around is Heavenly Prize. Now, I want to give you guys an idea of how long it took for somebody to put somebody without knowing it, put Heavenly Prize on the very last barn. And not only that, the process of the horse. For a lot of you guys that have, I'm sure most of you know nothing about the racing world, which is fine. But I'm just going to illustrate this. Before the horse is even born, For a lot of you guys that have seen the movie Secretariat, Diane Lane, by the way, I was in that movie as an extra. So if you watch that movie, you'll see me in there, and once you see me, you'll never unsee me again. But in that movie, Diane Lane, who's choosing to have a racehorse, she's going to start from scratch. Well, she has a bunch of bloodlines she has to choose from. So it starts off with the bloodline she has, and she figures out, okay, if I breed these horses to these horses and these horses to these horses, I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that. And so she did a really great job of choosing, of putting the odds together. What are the odds of her getting a really spectacular racehorse? And she ended up getting Secretariat out of it. Now that was, before she could do that, the whole process, before the horse was even born, the whole process at the very least had to start 11 months before, and because it takes 11 months for a horse to be foaled. Now, if you're thinking about bloodlines and all that stuff long before then, and you have to do your research. And when you do your research, you have to figure out which horse is running now that's good, which horse can I breed to now, how much is it going to cost, all of this stuff. So you could stretch it out well before the horse is born, a couple of years before, just starting to think about who you're going to breed to, when you're going to breed to, and where you're going to breed to. All of this is super important. Who you're going to breed to matters. When you're going to breed matters, because you're trying to time it out before January. All horses' birthdays in the racing world are January 1st, because that's how they determine when a horse races, what year he is in his racing. So if you have a 2-year-old race, you want all the 2-year-olds in there. If you're in a 3-year-old, you want all the 3-year-olds in there. And so you have to. The racing world goes to January 1st as a default. Now, when you have Diane Lane choosing Secretary Bloodline, not only is she thinking about this years in advance, everything has to go very smooth, and everything has to click. And then the breeding itself, when the horse mounts, they do a lot of what they call I don't want to say fake breeding, but they'll have a horse jump on the mounting block, and then they'll transfer. They have to have a live. Versus artificial, it has to be live insemination. And so that has to go right, because there could be a lot of complications in that. And then the next 11 months, the foal has to be right. You're hoping you don't have twins, because there's a risk that you may have twins. And if you have twin horses, they're gonna use the same space up in the uterus of the mother, and then therefore they're not going to get as big. And you want a big racehorse, you want a fancy racehorse, or not fancy, but you want a big horse, because big horses tend to stride out. You want to increase your odds when it comes to winning a race, and so you're gonna all these odds. So Diane Lane was putting all the odds in her favor. So when the horse was born, she got one of the best horses. Now, did she know exactly 100% what she was doing? No. Nobody does. God is the author, ultimately, of everything else. Secretariat turned out to be one of the best racehorses, and one of the horses I'd love to ride in heaven one day. But the process of Secretariat going from years in advance of thinking all the way to becoming this famous racehorse was no different than the heavenly prize horse that I saw, that somebody went through the same process, got this wonderful horse, and then years later the horse made it, won whatever big races it did, enough recognition where they had a sign and they put it all the way at the very end of the last barn. And then I just happened to come up to it, and it just happens to time on the week of when we're going home, guys. After I'm looking for the right barn, they said it's going to be here somewhere, and it's not here, so let's go to the next barn. And then finally we get there. It took me about 3 or 4 shots, to find the right barn. And I even asked somebody, hey, where's this barn at? So to me, that was not just a confirmation, that's a big deal. And the other thing I asked God about is God, can you please talk to me every day? Because it's important that you talk to me, especially about this whole rapture thing. I don't want to be wrong about it. I feel like I kind of, to be honest with you, after I've kind of shut down from really wanting to talk about the rapture to anybody else except for the church. Because at this point, my family, I have not even, my family still thinks I'm a date setter, and I'm having a really hard time talking to my family about it. It's to the point where me and my mom aren't really even talking about it, and it's because, we're so on opposite ends on this that it's hard to talk to her about this. And there's even a lot of other Christians on my Facebook that are not, as I kind of say, hey, we've solved the puzzle, here's a great video, the calendar one where we put everything together. That was an awesome video, whoever did that. That really struck home with me. And I put that, and I went from a lot of likes to like nothing, one like from somebody, and they didn't even read it. They just automatically liked my post the minute I posted it. And I was like, okay. And so, I was like, that's fine. But then I put something about Charlie Kirk on. I love Charlie. Charlie was a great inspiration. He had a beautiful photo, of Charlie throwing the hat out, and it said legends never die. And I got 30 likes like in a half an hour. So it's kind of frustrating that nobody is willing to listen to me about, and this is why I'm just like kind of done, telling people about the rapture, other than I will tell strangers, like this morning when I pulled up to the gate and I'm looking for my license, I was like, oh, sorry, I'm watching this video on the rapture. I think it's coming this week, just to kind of, randomly plant the seed, and the guy's like, oh, there's been a lot of raptures. And I said, yeah, we'll see, And so, but I don't even want to get that deep into it. I just kind of want to mention it, plant it in their mind, because when we do disappear, they're going to be looking at your video and your video and your video and my videos, and everybody's going to be looking at our videos. And I think that's going to be awesome, because that's really going to be the testimony that, as a church, that we need to give out. Now, the last confirmation, I don't really want to say confirmation, but when God has, because God doesn't talk to me directly as I want to. In fact, a lot of times I'll call him the God that never talks back. The God that doesn't talk back. He's actually talking back to me all the time. And I've learned I've got a lot of earwax, and I've got a lot of earwax. One of the scenes, I was watching the movie 2012 the other day, about obviously when they thought it was doomsday. And one of the best scenes in that whole movie was when you got in Tibet, you got the old monk and the young monk. Do they call them monks? I'm not sure what they call them. But, and the kid says, I think the end of the world is coming. And the old man has a cup of tea, and he starts pouring it, and it overflows. And he says, the scene is where he just keeps flowing, and he says, obviously the kid was right, but he was trying to demonstrate, the old man was trying to demonstrate that in order to think clearly, he went and poured the cup of tea out. So his mind was empty, in the sense that he could take the information for himself and not just keep filling it with what the old man thought. I think the old man thought it was junk at the time. I'm not sure of all the thoughts he had. But obviously we know that the rapture is real. But it illustrated to me that I have a lot of worldly ideas that I needed to get out of my mind before I could clearly think about this whole rapture thing. And in fact, I don't know about you guys, but I have found that the world is starting to push back harder and trying to put open doors for me that weren't originally being opened before the whole rapture thing, almost as if it's trying to draw me right back in for me to forget about this whole rapture thing. It's like trying to draw me back in. People, opportunities are opening for me in the world that usually would never open for me. And so I'm being very cautious about this. But one of the last things I want to say before I get going is I ask God, please at least talk to me every single day, especially when it comes to this whole rapture thing, and that you're here, and because I don't want to be wrong about it. And then he kind of points me out to, I've been talking to you about it every single day, and you don't even realize it until you look back into your book. Now, this book, I'm not trying to sell it, because obviously we're all going to leave here in a week, right, or less. But this book, even when I tell my editor, every time I put on my writing cap, I feel like I'm not writing this book. And this started 2 years ago, the process. And this book is about two guys that come, the name of the book itself is A Dead Man's Riddle, right? Because there's two guys in this book, two bitter enemies, and they have to come together to work to get out of this place that is inevitably coming to an end. And it's the last and final storm in their world, and in this case, they're in the world of Davy Jones's locker. And they don't know they're in Davy Jones's locker, but they know that there's spiritually things that are going way off in the wrong direction. They don't know what's going on, but all they know is that there's a riddle that needs to be solved, and in that riddle, they have to work together instead of trying to keep killing each other. They have to work together to solve it, and they do it through Solomon's wisdom, which is in the coins that they have to collect on this island. And the way they get the coins, they have to each coin convicts them of their own personal. It says the riddle doesn't just demand answers; it demands transformation. So by the time they solve the riddles through Solomon's wisdom, which is found in each coin that they get, they're genuinely come to the point that they're not going to. The wisdom is that they're not going to get out of this world alive, and in order to truly get out, they have to be transformed, and they have to choose heaven or hell for themselves. And that is, and I thought, man, I started writing this two years ago, and I got done with writing this first half of the book, right around when Joshua came on the scene. And I thought, there's no coincidences that God was trying to tell me, even if I'm writing just this book, for a small audience or whatever, that it's my confirmation, because confirmations to me is not just, oh, hey, I see a number, and I respect other people that saw numbers, but it's the long process of me being in the right time in the right place for an event that took a long time to get to. And that to me is the confirmations I look for. Confirmations have to be a lot deeper. And God is, in this case, God has had me write a book, that I never thought of the ideas of, to come and show me that, hey, this book is my confirmation to you that this rapture thing is really coming, and that you are facing a storm. We are all facing a storm, and the only way we're going to get through it is through the transformation process. Now, for us Christians, obviously the transformation process happened. It doesn't just all come as a power move. It all came through every disappointment we had. I feel like we got stronger and more resilient. We got stronger and more resilient the more trials and the more mockers and scoffers came out. And because we knew and we felt that Joshua was right, and that if Joshua was indeed right and God's not a liar, then we all had the idea of going back into the Bible, and we discovered a bunch of things, as a church, like these two guys, they had to come together and put this riddle together, just like the church came together, and through this a whole transformation was formed. And I believe you and I were all escaping this final storm, through the wisdom that God has given us. And that is no different than this book in a nutshell. And I think that's my confirmation, my big confirmation, that we are truly, genuinely here. You guys, we have all solved the riddle in my case, or the puzzle in your case, and I really look forward to seeing every one of you up in heaven. I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm so worn out, so tired. I'm tired of the up and down roller coaster rides in my life. I'm tired of being in a box my whole life. I'm tired of not understanding things in this world, and I'm tired of just the broken. I wrote another book, and I want to tell you guys this. This book was a reaction. It's a kid's book, and it's called What is Love? It's about a fox that questions the reality of what is love, because I feel like society has just gone down the tubes of how to treat people with respect, how to like, for example, the dating world, I think, is probably one of the worst, is one of the best examples of what love is not, because people literally will just ghost each other if they don't find each other attractive or whatever it is, instead of giving the simple respect of, I'm not interested in you guys, I'm not interested in the most polite, loving kind of way, you know what I mean? And because I've learned that there's rejection, and then there's just you know, people, there's even loving ways where you can say no to people without making them feel hurt. And I've gone through, you know, I'm tired of just how the dating world is set up now, and I'm tired of how people, like, I guess, one last example before I go. When I went to Japan, my brother lives in Tokyo, Japan. The idea was that I love the people of Japan because they have a 1950s mindset, you know, and for the older folks that were alive back in the 1950s, even 60s, you know, people were a lot nicer. You don't see it the way it is. And people in Japan, there's, I think, 115 million people living in the size of California. That's like Japan, you know. And when you have that many people have to clean up. Like, you see these kids, and they're all what do you call it? They're respectful. They pick the garbage off. Japan's not dirty. Japan is beautiful. Japan is clean. Japan is very respectful of each other, because when you have 115 million people living on an island that size, you have to be. Otherwise, it would just be sheer madness all the time and craziness. And then I fly back from Japan, and the first thing I hear in the Chicago airports is somebody just giving the finger to somebody else, you know, and you know, and just being very disrespectful, you know, for nothing, like, you know, just to the people at the front desk that really don't, you know, they said, sorry, you missed your plane, you're gonna have to try again. And you know, and you know, and I found that on both sides, they were both being very rude to each other. If one of them even had enough love to say, okay, I understand, is there a way we can make it up to you? Or is there, or I'm sorry, I understand that I missed it, I'll just come back another time. You know, just very basic, is it called agape love, Christ love to each other. To me, when I flew back to the United States and I saw that, I thought that was really just, I just don't feel it here in the U.S. We've gotten so rude as a country, and that's all I'm going to say. The other thing I wanted to kind of add, well, I guess it's not important, so I wanted to leave that off with you guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope for anyone that comes over to this chapel, I hope you are passing through Hot Springs. I hope this is a free chapel you guys can walk into. It's absolutely beautiful. But if it's a weekend, you're going to have a lot of people here. In fact, this is the first time here in this chapel I've been to where there's nobody, simply because the weather's bad. It's on a Tuesday, and you know, and everyone's at school or work. And so, anyways, that's all I wanted to say, is that the confirmations I've been having are very clear. God is talking, and I think this is the end, and I hope you guys stay strong till the last and final moments here we have, and we'll see you in the air. Bye. So, just before I go, the reason why Heavenly Prize is such a big deal is not just the process it takes to get to be a full in the making to all the way to becoming this champion racehorse. It's also the statistics and how statistically it is against their odds. Even when you have everything right, a lot of things happen in the racing world. For example, it only takes one bad step for a horse to break down. And so, let's say you have 100 horses. Statistically, 90% of those 100 horses that you start off racing, 90% of those can barely pay their way, or they get injured, or like I said, they get injured. They something takes them out of the game, or they're just too slow, and then they just can't pay their way out, and they just end up cutting their loss on that. That the next 10% can pay for themselves, and that's about it. You know, they barely make it. And then that 1% where you get the Michael Jordans, the Wayne Gretzkys, the Secretariats, you know, the big players that we hear about that become famous, they really had to overcome. But in the horse world, that 1% can pay for 10%. So the odds in the horse world are statistically horrible. So when you have a great racehorse, it is kind of a big deal to the racing people. And so with that said, you know, I watch my posts on Facebook because I have a lot of jockey friends. I know a lot of owners, I know a lot of trainers, I know a lot of people in the business. And anytime their horse wins, even if it's a small win, thumbs up, because I want everybody to win. But we're not talking about horse racing anymore, if you catch my drift. Now we're talking about the church. You guys are the 1%. And don't drop out now. We are so close to the finish line. We can all see the finish line. And even with as much doubt and as much logic, I'm so proud that, because there and so much scoffing and mocking, I just want to say that good horses in the world of racehorsing, good horses overcome. Good horses overcome a bad trip. If they get too far left behind, they'll come running at the end, or if they do whatever it is that gives them, or if they have a bad rider on the back, or that's what we call a bad trip, is if they just get a bad trip all the way around, or they accidentally trip, or whatever obstacle that those horses get, they overcome and they run their race, and they end up winning. That's us, guys. We are the 1%ers, and and I'm willing to leave all the promises I have that this world has to offer, because I want to go home with you guys. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the air. God bless. Goodbye.